click.
Hello, Gandalf. Hi,
And
Michael.
we're
I am in the
live.
shower.
It is Sunday, February 14th. That's Valentine's Day to you, 2021. It is 5:02 p.m. And I am just going to refrain from the monologue today because, well, for reasons that will become obvious. Kate, we are not allowed to have fun anymore, but you have a surprise for us.
Yeah, I brought my mystery guest, and it's my Valentine. It's John Shea, my partner. And because we're in a studio apartment, lest the reader forget, the viewer forget that we're in a studio apartment, we can't. The only separate room in our house is the bathroom. So John's beautiful background of trees and snow is actually a shower curtain.
There we go. John banished to the shower curtain background. We should snap a picture of it for room later.
Yeah, I can't wait for the highlight reel clip of this.
Yeah, I know. That's just like, and from the bathroom, from 5 feet away.
John, welcome to the show.
So Kate was telling me she was having trouble finding a mystery guest for today because everyone said they were busy because it was Valentine's Day. And what do you know? I was free because actually my life partner, who I would expect to spend Valentine's Day with, was busy recording her podcast. And so I happen to have this evening open.
There we go.
It's like,
so, Kate, why don't the sincerity is dripping off you?
Yeah, it's like there's a reason there is another Twitter handle for John that his coworkers made for him called Troll John Shea, which is just like a picture of a troll and quotes of him around the office, sincerely trolling people. It's pretty funny.
So, Kate, interview John.
So John.
Wait, so maybe I'll start the interview. Are you nervous? Are you nervous about this, Kate?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, right.
Actually.
I think Kate understands that this is a bad idea and it can't possibly go well.
So
really, the best case scenario is I have either a libertarian monologue or an anti-government monologue that alienates all of her fans.
That's the best case scenario?
Yeah, and the worst case scenario is I try to refute everyone's arguments for everything because I'm a natural contrarian and everyone thinks that I'm both ideologically opposed to them and a giant asshole. And everyone hates me and is alienated from the show.
I see.
It's been a long 14 years. Like,
All right, so I want to start with a question. You are the second significant other to come on as a guest on In Lieu of Fun, but Kate is adamantly opposed to bringing a second mother on the show.
Oh yeah.
I'm curious for your explanation for that. Why won't Kate let her mother, the former judge, appear on In Lieu of Fun?
Well, maybe Kate should give us her explanation, then I'll tell you why it's bullshit.
Yeah. Why did I do this to myself? This is such a terrible idea. My mom's just like really like serious person, kind of like, and is kind of like, and is super nervous with public speaking actually. And like, she just gets really nervous and she just would not understand the fun of this at all. My dad would totally love it and get it and be like, but then he would just talk too much and you wouldn't get him to shut up and he would monopolize the conversation. And so that's why we're, there's just no parents. That's all. Is that right, John?
Is that a good explanation?
I don't know. I don't have a good guess for what Kate's mom would be like on the show. And I think there's a good chance that she would be extremely interesting and have a lot of good perspectives. And maybe we could drag some interesting stories from her about being a judge or interesting cases or decisions or arbitration she's handled. And I also think it's possible that she wouldn't like being on the show and wouldn't make a good guest as a result. I could see it going either way.
Yeah. Yeah, it was just kind of, that's all. It wasn't like there's not like some secret reason. That was the reason.
I want to say that one of the coolest parts of this is watching Scott Shapiro's running commentary on it in the chat.
Is Scott in the chat? I haven't
Yes.
This is amazing. There's like, one of my favorite things to do is to try to tell people any story ever that has happened, and for John to like completely make me sound like some type of unreliable narrator, like in any situation, including the story. See, you do this right now. You're doing this thing. You just like roll your eyes. Anyway,
I don't know why I was thinking about the polite way to claim that I have higher standards of epistemic rigor than you do.
Oh, thanks. Today's the day.
That wasn't
fight
it.
with me. So yeah, like the time that we met in Barnes and Noble, that you think is a really boring story, but I think that's an interesting story because I tell it better than you. So there you go.
So wait, let's have John tell the boring version and then Kate tell the interesting version, and we will do a poll on whether John's standards of epistemic rigor or Kate's panache for storytelling win the day.
It's somewhat unfair because Kate has the more interesting perspective for the story, and like my perspective is I was at a Barnes and Noble in my hometown around Thanksgiving, just before Thanksgiving, with my mom, looking for Christmas presents, and I ran into a good high school friend of mine who was at the Barnes and Noble with Kate, a person I did not know at the time, and we chatted a bit, and then she texted me afterwards.
And
now Kate, is your sense of that story that it is inaccurate, that it is incomplete, or it is just being told in a boring fashion?
No, it's completely accurate. It's just being told in a boring fashion. Like, it's so okay. So I had this friend, and he had decided that he had decided he was bisexual. So we went to the Barnes and Noble to go buy.
Hold on. Should I log out and just come back in a couple hours?
Yeah. Oh, fuck off, John. You can just put me on mute. You're like and anyways, and so we went to Barnes and Noble and we got all of the Dan Savage books, and we were coming down the thing, and he goes, "Oh, my friend John Shea is here with his mom. He just texted me. We should go find him." And I go, I was single, and it was Thanksgiving break, and I was bored, and so I was like, "Oh, this will be fun." I was 23. And I was like, "This will be fun. Like, I've heard about this guy before you've mentioned him. Like, that sounds great." And he was super cute, and we talked for a few minutes, and I was really hopped up on coffee. And so then I took my friend Dan's cell phone and I texted him from John, "Kate thinks you're cute," from my friend Dan's cell phone. And then a few minutes later, John texted back, "I think Kate's cute," or "Kate is cute," or something like that. And then Dan was like, "Get off my fucking phone, and here's his number." And so I texted John, and we met up for a beer, and we were both in the same hometown, but we were both not living there. We were back for the holidays. And so I thought I'd never see him again. And then like 14 years later and 5 years of long distance, it all kind of worked out. But it was a fortuitous trip to Barnes and Noble.
So you should all vote on the whose story is better question in the poll. So far, Kate is winning kind of overwhelmingly.
This is also, people like me more than they like John.
Well, John has not spent the last 10 months endearing himself to this crowd. Whereas you have a sort of, I think you're the sort of hometown favorite with the audiences.
I just want to go on the record. Janine said, "Love the lack of chill." Yeah, this was like 2007. And like I had and have never had. I just want to go on the record as saying that this is proof that I have never had chill. Like, I have never had it.
Have you told the audience about the coffee flow chart? Speaking of not having
the coffee
chill.
flow chart's really good. You should tell them. Yeah, this story in some way gave rise to a later that and the fact that I drank a ridiculous amount of coffee while I was in law school gave rise to a later flowchart that our friend Cosmo made for
No,
me.
I made the flowchart.
Oh, you made the flowchart? Is that Cosmo? Oh, sorry. Really? That's
Yeah.
not a Cosmo? You did make the flowchart, but Cosmo loved it. Okay, you can go ahead. Tell the story about the flowchart.
Kate would drink too much coffee and get hyped up, and when she was in law school, she had a 12-cup mason jar with like a wooden handle wired onto it, and every day she would fill it with 12 cups of coffee, and then drink them all on her way to law school, and then refill it.
Which 100% accurate.
And
was the coffee? How did you take that coffee? Was it black? I would hope so. Yeah. Good.
Yeah. And so the coffee flowchart was what? You developed it, like, we should put it out into the world. I think it's probably on your website somewhere.
But what is the coffee flowchart?
It was to help Kate decide whether she should have more coffee or not.
It was to help me decide whether I should have more coffee. Was I having more coffee to make me just feel good? Then I should probably not have more coffee.
Oh, so the answer wasn't always more coffee.
No, the answer was like pretty much the opposite.
Because in my mental flowchart, the answer is like, it's basically, do you have the slightest urge for more coffee? If yes, then have more coffee. That's kind of my working coffee flowchart.
Yeah, I think that works. It's not as good though when you're taking coffee 12 cups at a time.
You can't inure to it.
If you have a slight urge for coffee and then you guzzle 12 cups of it, that can lead to overconsumption.
This is gonna be TMI, but since we're already there, it was like I could every time I peed for all of law school, it smelled like coffee.
That's a little TMI, but all right.
It was just so much coffee. It was so much. It was really gross. I actually kind of it was just.
So do you drink less coffee now?
Oh yeah, so much less. I still drink. I go through phases. John introduced me to coffee detox, which was really great. What is
coffee detox?
It's like you go, you decide that you're going to take a break from any caffeination, and you you just plan for 2 days of your life to be completely unproductive, while your body literally when I do it, I just have this I just can't stop sleeping. I just sleep all day for a whole day. And then I wake up and I feel great, and I don't need coffee anymore. But I'm lucky I don't get headaches.
Yeah, I get pretty bad headaches.
Do you? Yeah, I don't get headaches.
If I don't drink coffee, I get pretty sick. All right.
So this has been fascinating.
Next important question. Since John is big into the brevity in the answers, how was the production of the New Yorker article for you?
Oh my God.
Which part of it?
It's an 18-month process. Tell us the story from your point of view.
It's hard. Right now, it's hard for me to access much outside of the past month, where Kate has just been working on this 20 hours a day, it seems like, pretty much every day for the last month. And I don't know, I'm a little anxious about talking about it because I'm not sure how much I'm allowed to reveal and whether things are privileged or confidential or otherwise you're not supposed to talk about them. But the last month has been a lot of Kate on the phone negotiating with either her editor, her fact checker, or her sources about how things would end up in the piece. And it seemed incredibly stressful and trying, and I don't think it's not something I could have navigated at all. I don't know, if I had written the piece and felt it was good and my editor changed it in a way that changed the meaning or changed how my sources looked, I think I would have just been fuck you, no, I'm not doing this job. And if my sources told me something that I thought was really good in the piece and then later didn't want it to be attributed to them or didn't want it to show up in the piece, I think I'd be what the fuck are you doing to me? I spent so much time working on this, and I don't think I could negotiate them to get to a good spot. I just wouldn't have the resolve to do it, and I really admire that Kate was able to handle all of that.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I should also say that just on a really fundamental level. There's just kind of like, we moved back. And like 2 weeks ago, like as this piece was starting to close and I was starting to teach in person, and as a result, like if there has been anything, like we're sitting in like literal just complete disarray. There is just stuff on every surface. Like we never got to like unpack anything. We just put the boxes into the house and got like the internet working, and have like been living amongst kind of madness for like 2 weeks because it just wasn't a priority. And I'm vaccinated for the first time, like the first shot, and I'm teaching and that's going well. And the piece came out and that is going well. And I think that like, I don't know, it's just kind of, yeah. I have to say it's been nice to not be, are you ready? What are you like most excited for now that the piece
I
is
want to say
done?
one thing that I think the piece is amazing. I think it turned out great. One thing I'm a little sad that didn't make its way into the piece as much as I would have liked is in the beginning when you first started working with Facebook, Kate, I'm not sure if you remember this, but you spent a lot of time being like, are they good or are they bad? I can't really tell. And I said, listen, it's a company with thousands of people, and some of them will be good principled people who are trying to do the right thing, and some of them will be money hungry sociopaths who will do whatever it takes to get promoted and don't really care about the principles, and some of them will try to blow smoke up your ass, and some of them will be honest and good sources. And I think you like eventually came around to agreeing with me about that, and you saw some good people and some bad people, and you saw some people who were trying to make the oversight board succeed and some who clearly were not, and I don't feel like that made it into the piece very much. And I think it didn't make it into the piece because the people who oppose the oversight board can't really go on the record or can't be public about it. But yeah. I'm a little sad we didn't get more of that kind of internal conflict.
There was so much that I was sad about. There was like a whole bunch that didn't go into it, but it's 8,000 words, and just if it's going to be 8,000 words and it's that much stuff, there's so much on the cutting room floor, just so much. I just like can't.
And it's 8,000 words of pure action too. It's just like,
I know, it's like it really kind of like hums. I mean, like literally, there's whole, yeah. So, anyways, yeah, it was just. The thing that's really strange about this is that I also feel like no one talks about how you get published in these types of gatekeeper places like the New Yorker or the New York Times op-ed page or the Washington Post op-ed page or whatever. And Ben always talks about this. Ben, you've always talked about like your time openly and like humanly about like being, writing opinion pieces every single day and what that was like. I think that like most people don't think about it from that perspective. I don't know. What do you think?
About what exactly?
Just kind of like the mechanics of like being at a high stakes kind of record, like the paper of record type of organization, and the state, like kind of how crazy that is, but also just like how much work it is.
Yeah. So I mean, it has certain qualities that are really different from other places. So when you're writing a piece for the New Yorker, and Kate's going to nod when I say this, we've never discussed it, but everybody returns your phone calls. If you leave somebody a message that says, hey, I'm calling you from the Washington Post editorial page, they call you back. And it actually doesn't matter who they are. They don't actually have anything more important to do than to talk to you and to try to nudge what you're writing in the direction that would be useful for them, or at least would not be harmful for them. And so that's a really interesting dynamic. And by the way, if you're a law professor at St. John's, and you call somebody and you say, I'm working on a law review article, they probably 80% chance will not return your call if they have something important that other things that they're doing. But if you're exactly the same person and you say, I'm calling because I'm doing a story for the New Yorker, they will call you back. And obviously there are exceptions to both rules, but those are very good rules of thumb. And that's a gatekeeper function. The second big thing is that these institutions have a lot less power than they used to. And the reason is that there are a lot of competing institutions that are, I wouldn't say they're not as prestigious. They're not as valuable in sort of valued in the public sphere, but they do very good work, and they have lowered the barriers to entry very, very dramatically. And so, somebody like Kate 20 years ago is a slave to the New Yorker. If the New Yorker is interested in publishing,
100%. Oh my
right?
God, that is such a good point. That is such a good point.
And today, like, just the mere possibility of publishing something like this in the New Yorker, she would tolerate all kinds of shit in order to do. Now, the amount of shit she needs to tolerate is much lower, and that's she mentions, and John mentions, stuff that was left on the cutting room floor. Something will happen to that stuff. She'll do something else with it. 20 years ago, if that stuff gets left on the cutting room floor, it's gone.
Yeah,
it's
totally.
Just cut.
Or it gets cut into a book that no one reads or something.
Or it doesn't, right? It just sits there. The number of venues for publication now is so large and so multifaceted that a much higher percent of the research that Kate does ends up available than it would otherwise. So I think it's mostly a good thing. The flip side of it is that, a lot of those additional publication venues are horrible, and, when we're talking about it in the context of this publication, of this stuff, we're talking about, great places that she might do a second round. But, for example. But we could also, in the same department as Gateway Pundit, right? And there's a lot of, real, like, the expanding of the list of publications is at every level, and a lot of the total volume of new publication material is disastrous. So it's a really complicated media environment.
Yeah, that's really well stated. So, John, I'd be remiss if I didn't, I don't want to act like your only job is to be my partner. I don't want to although thank you for doing that job and you do it so well. But tell us, you have been I think your story is kind of fascinating.
Who the fuck are you?
Yeah, who the fuck are you? Tell us, you went to Dartmouth, you majored in
I grew up in Rochester, in a neighboring town to Kate, or the same town, but a different school district, depending on how you divvy it up.
School district, John.
I went to college at Dartmouth College, where I studied physics, and then I spent a year as a ski bum in Aspen, Colorado. And then I went back to Dartmouth for a master's program in solar terrestrial physics.
Hold on. We're going to linger on this. John, tell the fun story about when you were driving. Tell the story. You did a bunch of jobs when you were in Aspen, Colorado, and you were a ski bum. But tell the story about selling ski boots to De Niro. Was it De Niro? Pacino?
I can never remember which it was. How do people keep De Niro and Pacino
You're not
apart?
allowed to say that.
They're other than being Italian and having names that end in O, they're very unsimilar.
They're almost identical.
They're really not.
Yeah.
It was De Niro.
It was De Niro. Okay.
The first winter I was in Aspen, I drove a taxi and I worked at a cross-country ski shop, teaching lessons and selling what was ever in the retail shop. And one day I was closing the shop alone. It was like 4:55, 5 minutes before closing, and some people came into the shop, a family with a guy with them. And they were just like, the kids ran over the shop and were just like filling their arms with everything. They were getting gloves and hats. They just wanted to buy everything. And the guy told me the family wanted a set of cross-country skis. And so I sat them down and measured their shoes and went in the back room to get them boots to try on. And then while I was in the back room, I was like, hey, that guy looked a lot like Robert De Niro. And then they ended up buying $1,500 worth of cross-country ski equipment. And I stayed an extra half hour late and got, another $20 in pay because I was there for an extra half hour or something. And then they went on their way, and I looked up the family afterwards, and I could tell from the wife that it was Robert De Niro. And
tell the story. Tell the story about the time that somebody crashed a car at Brian Wilson's house.
A friend of mine worked for a valet that parked cars outside of the Elk Club, or whatever one of those old white guy private clubs are. They have one in Aspen. I forget what it's called. And the friend was a valet there, and the guy who ran the valet business had a side business doing valet for parties. And one day there was a party at Brian Wilson's house, and I signed up to be one of the valet parkers, and another friend of mine, Kat Anderson, did the coat check. And so we all went out to Brian Wilson's house, and we would guests would show up at the front door, which was this driveway off the main road, kind of in the woods, and we would get in their car and then drive it to a parking lot like a half mile away, and then come jogging on the icy road back to the house and do that again. And we did it for a couple hours, and then things quieted down. Most of the guests had showed up, and the hors d'oeuvres were done, and they brought out a plate full of leftover foie gras pate, and I had my first foie gras ever from leftovers at Brian Wilson's house. And the valet crew was me and my friend Evan and this Australian guy. There are a lot of Australians in Aspen for some reason. And then a guy shows up late in a brand new Range Rover, and the Australian guy gets in it to park it, and he promptly backs it into a brand new Lexus that was parked in the driveway. Not hard, but just hard enough to break both of the headlights and badly dent the bumper. And he got out, and I was like, oh my God. And then the boss, like from a movie, on the spot fired him and told him to walk the 2 miles back to town. And then he was the boss was all like, what am I going to do? It's going to be tens of thousands of dollars in repair. And he had to explain it to the people. And Evan and I were just standing in the corner being like, oh my God, this is so funny. Glad it's not my problem.
So how did you end up as a libertarian programmer?
So I ended up as a programmer because when I was in graduate school, my research was computer modeling. And so I was writing computer programs all the time, and they weren't applications, but it was still programming. And I kind of hated it, and I hated my field of study. And a high school friend of mine, I got in touch with him, and he basically said that he had a 2-person company, and if I wanted to try doing a contract job with them, I could. And so I kind of took a contract with him, and I enjoyed it a lot more than I enjoyed doing physics research. And so I ended up working with him for about 3 years before I came to Foursquare, the company I've been at for the last 10 years.
Yeah. So.
And what about the libertarian part?
Oh yeah.
So I came out of.
How did you do this? Are you out of the closet as a libertarian now?
We've talked about this. I've rebranded as neoliberal.
Not my politics. I don't even understand this. Whatever. Jesus. John.
I've rebranded as neoliberal. I do think neoliberal is a better fit for me. I believe in a strong social safety net, and I want everyone in the world to be wealthy and happy and have all of their needs met. And I think that market competition and a social safety net are the best way to do that.
So that's not really libertarian. That's just kind of pro-growth, sort of pro-growth social safety net progressivism, right?
Yeah, I think I take the growth more seriously than most people. From my perspective, this is kind of a common libertarian talking point, but libertarians will say 200 years ago, the whole world was poor and virtually everyone in the world lived at a subsistence level.
You say this all the time. Sorry.
And now there's tremendous wealth in the world. And even relatively poor people in the U.S. have a kind of wealth and technology that Louis XIV couldn't dream of. And even past that, in the last 20 or 30 years, literally 1 billion people who used to be living on less than $1 a day now are living on 3 or 4 times that. And those 1 billion people are so much richer, not because of progressive politics or because of a social safety net, but because of liberalized economic policies in China and India and economic growth in those regions. And so I really think long term, if you want no one in the world to be poor, you can't do that just by giving people stuff. You have to build a world that has a lot more wealth and a lot more riches. And I think it's worth prioritizing getting to that world that is much richer than our world today.
I completely agree with that, but I don't think of that as libertarianism. I think of that,
also agree with. I know.
I think of that as first of all, reality, that increased wealth, reasonably distributed, is the only way. Like even distribution of small quantities of wealth, it makes for equality and poverty. That's actually what the Soviet Union managed to do. Have reasonably equitable distribution of very little resources, and very small, low growth over long periods of time. So people didn't get appreciably richer. I don't think of that observation as libertarian. I think of that observation as just reality. And I'm curious who you see as arguing against that.
John, don't say things that are going to be crazy and I'm going to get dragged for. That's the only thing I have. I don't know, you're not going to, but I'm not censoring you, but go ahead.
Ben, I think I largely agree with you, and I see that like disagreements between myself and say the mainstream Democratic Party, I think are mostly about, I see as being a trade-off between, I guess you might call it equality or social welfare and economic growth. But I don't feel like the Democratic Party or the liberals I have in my life see it that way. I think that they don't see the progressive policies they want as hurting long-term growth or making people in the future poorer. I think that they see progressive policies as just being strictly better than pro-market alternatives. Do you disagree with that?
Yes and no. I think that's interesting. I mean, I think that in a society that is generally committed to economic growth, Democrats tend to talk about equity. But they tend to price in economic growth to the, they tend to assume economic growth. Republicans and libertarians tend to not assume economic growth, but to argue for, what they would call pro-growth policies. And so you have an apparent tension between growth and equity. Whereas I think what most, with different emphases, center-right and center-left people agree on is a growth environment in which there are accommodations made to equity. And the question is, how much accommodation? And so I tend to listen through Democrats not talking about growth and just hear them saying, of course, we assume we're going to do this against a background of growth. Here's what we want to do, assuming there's the growth to support it. And of course, the risk is that there isn't the growth to support it, which I agree with you, they're often insufficiently sensitive to. But I do think there's a pretty basic, at least since the Clinton years, a pretty basic Democratic commitment to economic growth. At least in the sort of more moderate part of the party.
You could be right, but I guess when I hear Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders talking about taxing the rich or raising revenue by taxing the rich, they don't talk about a trade-off, but like they don't never acknowledge that doing that might have negative consequences or might hurt the economy.
Agreed. And I mean, I was not a supporter of either Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders, partly for that reason. But I also don't think of myself as a libertarian. It's interesting. Okay.
It is like a really strange set. It's like it is. I don't know. Like it's changed also like over the years. I think like there's a lot to be said for. I feel that basically how John consumes information, the things that he reads, bring me this really valuable perspective that frankly I don't get from any of my social networks or the things that I would tend to read or like consider. And so it's always just kind of it's like really wonderful to kind of go back and forth.
All right, so we would be remiss
Oh, we have to
if
bring
we
the
did
guest.
not bring on Scott Shapiro to
Oh
ask
my
John a
God.
question.
Oh,
I
God.
think that would be just very inappropriate. So I don't know if he's posed a question, but he's now on
Hi,
screen to
Scott.
ask one.
Hi, Scott.
What?
Welcome.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Oh, yes.
Are you also in our bathroom? No.
No. Wait, does your bathroom have a bookcase?
No, that's true.
And track lighting. It's
Yeah.
Very nice bookcase.
Well, thank you very much. By the way, I just want to say that this is like almost exactly like the Valentine's Day dinner conversation that I have. It's like a very big debate. It's like always, economic growth versus distribution. It's actually beautiful.
Actually, what most of our life is actually like. It's not.
Right.
It's not.
But first of all, I just want to say that this is, first of all, you're very appealing, John. You don't need me to say this, but this is really great. But I want you to say, can you say something really crazy? Like
Are you going to ask? Is there a particular crazy thing, or do you just want me to?
Like a Richard Posner kind of market for babies kind of thing, or something like that. Like, because I think
Tell them what you used to tell me about clerking. John, when I was clerking, John, slightly tongue-in-cheek, told me that there was only 2 judges that I could possibly clerk for and be plausible. And one was Scalia and the other was Posner. And those were the only 2 those were the most serious judges that I should consider clerking for.
Scott, remind me sometime to tell you my story about Posner's baby market. I have a hilarious story for you about it.
Okay. Next Valentine's Day.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. But John, so John, can you like?
Do you want me to actually answer that first question, or should we?
Yes, please. Yeah.
No.
So, well, when I was younger, I was much more of a principled libertarian, and I believe more strongly in kind of like the individual rights arguments around libertarianism, or the strict economic freedom arguments. And I'm much less confident those are right now, but I do think a lot of the arguments are serious and interesting and should be engaged with by liberal people much more than they are. And I think a lot of even the absurd libertarian arguments have things we can learn from them. And I think it damages liberals to the extent that which they just scoff and laugh at them instead of engaging with them and figuring out what parts they agree with and what parts they disagree with.
I said, did you read Nozick and thought, that? Was that I want the night?
My awakening was after
something?
college when I was living in Aspen, and afterwards I read a lot of economics blogs, and I became a libertarian reading Mankiw's blog and Stephen Landsberg at the University of Rochester and Marginal Revolution.
He went nuts.
I haven't really read the originals very much. I haven't read Nozick or read To Serfdom or even really much Milton Friedman, although I have watched Free to Choose.
Right.
All right, we're going to make Scott disappear unless you have.
Scott had a follow-up question, or was that the follow-up question?
I did. Yeah, the follow-up question is, what is solar terrestrial physics?
Oh yeah, actually, this is a fun story.
Given
solar
that there's
terrestrial
no
physics?
terrestrial sun.
Yeah, it's the physics of space between the sun and, say, the Earth's atmosphere, or the upper atmosphere of the Earth. And so solar terrestrial physics is kind of everything from the sun's corona, which is the atmosphere of the sun, to the solar wind, to the magnetic field around the Earth, and that kind of stuff. In particular, I studied the Earth's magnetic field and the way the solar wind and solar flares interact with the Earth's magnetic field.
I know you used to draw pictures for me that would just show how you'd get all this data back from the solar flare bouncing off the Earth's magnetic field, and then you would build models to understand how that was happening. Yeah.
So Scott, it's just like inclusive legal positivism involving the sun, and terrestrial stuff. All right, I think we got to go to questions.
Yeah,
questions not from Scott. So
Hi, Scott. Thank you for your questions. They were very thoughtful.
Oh, here's an important question from Daniel here. Christopher Argyris has a key question.
Yeah, the solar winds controversy, I'm not gonna lie. Every time the solar winds thing comes up, I've been like, wait, solar winds is about data, but it's also not about solar terrestrial physics at all. And I have to keep like, but both of those things were things that John would be able to tell me about. So anyway.
All right. Daniel, in his native habitat, the floor is yours.
Congratulations, Kate, again on the article.
Thanks, Daniel.
John, what did you think of In Lieu of Fun when you first heard about it?
Oh, that's a good question.
It's hard for me to remember. What did we talk about when you first started doing it? We talked about whether it was good for your career or not, whether it was worth the time.
I mean, it was just like I don't even think we talked about that actually.
You definitely did.
I don't know. I just think I was like, oh, Ben asked me to do this thing. This is very flattering and nice. And then I was like, I think I want to do this. And we were just like, we'd just gotten to Cape Cod and things were still crazy. And I was like trying to finish the EL piece and like teach and things were nuts. But then like, I don't know. Yeah. It was just great.
I don't know. I think it's been great for you. And I'm like blown away by this great community you have. Hi, chat. Like I stop and lurk in the chat sometimes, and I'm always impressed anytime there's an internet community that's not toxic and that's friendly. And it seems like everyone here is so interesting and smart and kind. And so that really, really knocks me over. And I'm glad that Kate has that. And many of the conversations are super interesting. And I think the show is great. I will say that having Kate unavailable every single day from 5 to 6 is sometimes a slightly annoying constraint on her life.
Well, you know, she gets, I've missed a day. She gets to miss a day too if she wants.
There have been times when we've been out in the canoe and had to literally race home to get Kate back for the show. And like, there's the day when we moved from Cape Cod back to Brooklyn and we had to get that done by 5 so that she could have the show, which was like, a slightly annoying constraint, but
you could miss a day.
Not that big a deal.
It's true. I could miss a day.
Daniel Welch has a key question.
Oh my God.
As
Hi,
well
Daniel.
as well as a cat over his right shoulder.
Cat over his shoulder and amazing glasses.
The floor is
Everything
yours,
that's
sir.
happening is great.
John, do you have any rescue animal stories? Animal rescue stories? That you'd like?
Oh God.
You've talked about Anne, right, Kate?
I talked about Anne, but you should talk about Anne.
No, I don't have good Anne stories.
Is Anne the squirrel?
Anne was the squirrel. Anne was the baby red, the baby red squirrel. And John fed her with an eyedropper, and she would crawl up John's shoulder and up and sit on the very tip top of his head, and like she would like sit on the top of his head, and, like poke, like look around, and just like
we have a photo.
He was, like, cooking.
I was cooking once, and Kate put Anne on my shirt, and Anne was crawling around my shirt, and then suddenly I felt like claws on my neck, and I'm like, oh my God, what is happening back there? And Anne had crawled up my neck and perched on top of my head while like my hands were full with the cooking, so I couldn't like do anything about it. Now I've got a squirrel on top of my head. We have a photo of it somewhere.
Yeah, it was really cute. It was like weird, but it was cute. I don't know. You're always like, I love that you always like, John's very good at like, he doesn't like, he like is like me. He like says yes to things and then figures out how we can like make them work. And that includes the animals.
But how did you feel about the cormorant when Kate was like,
oh my God.
I'm bringing the cormorant home? Was that like, cool?
No, I was worried that there wouldn't be any rescues that could like take the cormorant in, or that if there were, they would be an hour away and not open for 3 days. And I was like, I don't want to be stuck with a cormorant in the house that's wounded indefinitely. If I had like known that we could give it to someone to take care of the next day, I would have been totally okay with it. But at the time, not knowing that, I was like, oh, I don't want to take on this potentially unbounded responsibility for this possibly dying animal. But at the same time, like I like convinced Kate to leave it where it was. And then she went back and wanted to get it. And I like knew even if I finally got her home without the cormorant, she probably would sneak out in the middle of the night to go try to save it. So I knew I didn't have a choice in the matter.
Excellent.
Very true.
Christopher Argyris.
Good evening.
Hi, Christopher.
So John, prior to today, I only knew two things about you. One was that you were college friends with Kate Gage, And congrats to Kate, because I was convinced that she couldn't bring on any more mystery guests or guests that knew my brother's ex-girlfriends. But so you've done up there. So the other thing that she revealed in an episode where we were talking to a guest who was in his in-laws' house with no lamps was that your family home apparently had one lamp and no light in your bedroom. So I wanted to ask you to tell that story. And did you really study in your closet? And what's your journey from being in a home with limited electricity to becoming a programmer? And do you have any? Does this give you any perspective on renewable energies or alternative energy sources?
Okay, really quickly, I just want to say that John's mom is totally watching right now, and so like she is sitting there being like, I didn't like deprive John of light like as a child.
Well, it was not the case that my house had limited electricity. It was just that my bedroom didn't have a light like with a wall switch. It was a room where you would have to install a standing lamp and other light fixtures, and we never did that. And it wasn't a big deal. I just never studied in my bedroom. I studied like the house computer was in the living room, and that's where I did most of my work. And I would do homework at the kitchen table, and my bedroom was kind of mostly just for sleeping and changing. But I do have thoughts about renewable energy, and they come from my time studying solar terrestrial physics. Like the center of solar terrestrial physics is plasma physics. That's what space is made out of. And then another area where plasma physics comes into play is nuclear fusion. And nuclear fusion is kind of a low tier, low prestige field of physics, which is something I find completely baffling because if we ever get nuclear fusion right, it's a almost boundless source of clean energy. And given the state the world is in, I think that should be a priority and that we should be building fusion reactors and trying to get really good at it. And instead, the high prestige areas of physics are things like high energy physics and CERN, which have almost no practical application. And I just find that very confusing. And I don't know why there's not more demand in the physics community for fusion research.
Rachel Coit, the floor is yours.
Hi, happy Valentine's Day, everyone.
Hey.
Hi, Rachel.
Hi, I like your red shirt.
I like your red sweater. I was just thinking.
Thank you.
Very nice.
So my question is, if someone were to put a piece of software on the internet for free, but with a user agreement you have to sign to use it, what's the worst thing that can happen to someone who intentionally violates that user agreement? And what is also the worst thing that should happen to them? And then it's assuming that what you've done to violate it, it's not something evil or illegal. So say Microsoft Word had something hidden in there that said you can't do Valentine's Day cards with this. So Microsoft Word isn't free.
But no, we get what you're saying. An open source, like sometimes we have like open source creator Valentine's of like cards, but you just couldn't make Valentine's Day cards.
Death penalty
for some reason.
Death penalty, definitely. Okay. There's a similar situation that someone I know has encountered. Not
facing imminent execution.
Yes. Yeah. They found a piece of software that had a writer. It had in the user agreement, you have to make me a co-author if you use this for a publication, which violates a lot of norms in the academic publishing world. And so that's what kind of got me thinking about this.
So we have a property rights and internet law person here and a software engineer. So between the two of you, you should know the answer to this.
What do you think, John?
I don't know. I'm trying to think of the like controlling case law. I know that there's a click wrap or a shrink wrap licensing case law around that, but I don't remember what the case law is.
I mean, there's like two separate issues here. It's like what would happen and what should happen. If you design something and you make it open and then you like constrain the use in some way, you can always go after individuals for like doing that, whether a court would enforce that or not. The terms that you laid out when you put out your thing into the world is like another story. And it would be like, what did you want out of it? Would you want damages or would you want them to stop using it in the way that you described? So there's like just a bunch of different kind of questions there. But generally speaking, like, yeah, if you put something out, you can always, like, if you make something like that, as I tell my students, you can like always sue. Like, you can always start a cause of action against someone, and that is going to cost them money and be exhausting for them to defend and do whatever else, and it will create visibility or whatever. But like, that doesn't mean it'll always survive. So,
my guess there is that if someone has a license that says if you use their software you have to cite them, and you use their software and don't cite them, can they sue you for not citing them? I don't know what damages a court would find on that.
right.
Could they sue you for copyright violation? That seems plausible to me. Like, if I have a book and it's copyrighted and it's on a website and someone downloads and reads it, that's a clear copyright violation. If I put a book that's freely available on my website, but say you have to like put some licensing agreement and someone downloads it, I think that's like still potentially a copyright violation. And I think that's the closest analogy I can think of.
Yeah.
Esther, the floor is yours.
Hi, everybody. Hope you're well.
Hi, Esther.
Hey, Esther.
So I'm on the edge of my chair because my dog's taking up the entire seat behind me here. This is kind of a generic question I've always had an interest in, but I'm going to direct it at you today, John. So how did your study of physics change the way you saw the world, or did the way you already looked at the world draw you to the study of physics?
Good question. I was just a science nerd. When I was a kid, I wanted to learn all of science. I went to college and I'm like, I'm going to take every science class at the college and learn all of physical science. That's what I wanted. And I kind of ended up doing physics, both because I think it's the prettiest science and because it's the bottom science. Everything is made out of physics. And so to some extent, I think if you know physics, you know everything, or you could build everything on top of physics. And I don't know if it's my nature or if it's something I learned from doing physics, but I'm like very drawn to anything in my life. If I can come up with a mathematical model for how it works, or like a formal model for how it works, that's what I'm trying to do. It's also kind of what draws me to economics and libertarianism and the markets.
All right.
Well, then it's 5:55. Or almost 5:55, 5:54.
Yeah, so John, tell us the key story to close. Tell us the key story about Kate that she really doesn't want you to tell, but won't be angry at you for telling.
Yeah.
I would have to prep for that story. I don't know. I don't have one of those ready.
We're going to give you 30 seconds. We'll just wait here.
I don't know. I'm trying to think of like something that would be...
Have you talked about your knitting at all?
No.
Why not?
When did Kate start smoking a pipe?
Oh, yeah.
She only does that. I don't know. She very rarely does that. She's had this pipe and it's been with her. She carries it with her wherever she goes, and it acts like it's her sacred family heirloom pipe. And
it's
her
not. Just my
special
brother gave it to me.
grandfather's hickory ash tobacco or whatever. But she only uses it like twice a year at most. And I think it's mostly an affectation for looks.
All right, that was good.
Thanks, Ben.
All right.
John.
Kate, what's your story about John that you shouldn't tell? Like the giveaway, like that his pipe is really just an affectation.
What is it? No, John is actually just pretty much like the best thing ever. And so I know it's like a very corny thing to say, but what do you do that's an affectation?
It doesn't have to be that. It's just like...
Okay, okay, well, I'm trying to think of something. How, like... I don't know. What is something about... I don't know. Like, I'm just not thinking of anything right now. I would say that, like, to close, I guess I would just say, find yourself someone who like just is so supportive and so great and like, and also so interesting and never boring. I just am never bored. Like, he like knows all this stuff and he's just like always teaching me things, and he's so curious and is so interested in everything. And like, I'm not trying to sound minimizing. I just think that that's like, when I was 23, I don't think I knew that was like a key quality that I wanted from someone as a partner for the rest of my life. And like, that was like, I don't know, it's been just absolutely like, it's just been wonderful. So that's it.
We're going to leave it there. John,
Sorry, kiddo.
it's been a pleasure.
Chat, Ben, thank you very
much.
much. Kate, thanks for having me on the show. Chat, it's great to see all of you guys, or to let you see me.
You're a great American.
I'll be back with you in the regular chat tomorrow. So,
and we will be back tomorrow. By the way, everybody, your pleas for John McWhorter to come on are answered. John has responded, and we are figuring out the right day. But he is going to come on. We have decided in his capacity as a linguist, not in his capacity as a anti-woke culture warrior. So we're going to be talking linguistics with John McWhorter. Not sure when that's going to be, but we will be back tomorrow, 23 hours and 2 minutes from now. And until then, we don't have fun anymore, but we do have 100% participation in lieu of fun by significant others of the principals at this point. So thank you, John, for completing that. And we will see you all tomorrow.